Montross, former Tar Heel star and Westwood One analyst, and a first-round pick back in '94. What's happening, big man? How are you today?
Good morning. How are you guys?
We're doing well. How do you still have the flat top?
Well, let's just say it's a little more. There's a little more curvature to it these days, but it may have something to do with age.
Yeah, exactly.
Understood.
Yeah, we know that feeling.
They were all battling that.
Exactly. I mean, we have no hair, so flat top is just smooth top and glisten top. Look, you were one of the 5 champions for the UNC Tar Heels. Obviously, they've been to more Final Fours than anyone in college basketball, 19 to be exact. But you were on that 93 team that we all remember because of the Chris Webber non-timeout. But going back to the semifinal, this point in the season for your team then, and it gives you some perspective on what this current North Carolina team is feeling, what's the emotion getting to this point where you're 2 games away from reaching that ultimate goal?
Well, I think that's it. I mean, you're 2 games away from hitting the pinnacle of success in college basketball for so many of these teams, and these guys set this as their goal at the beginning of the season. It's something that you work throughout the season. You're working in the off season, and for many of these guys, this is a career goal because it just doesn't come along very often. And so you have an opportunity now to capture something that has been elusive for so many, and it's just a great sense of achievement to get to the Final Four. But the magic of this for these guys, because they can't really get a sense of appreciation. They're living in the moment. The appreciation of achieving a Final Four berth will come down the road. But the fact is they're so focused on this final championship run. They're 2 games away from being written in history.
Eric, at this point in the year, now obviously when you go from the Elite Eight to the Final Four, you've got a few more days of practice rather than the earlier rounds where it's a quick Thursday, Saturday, or Friday, Sunday turnaround. And, you know, he has some time now to really work on infiltrating the zone. But how much teaching, the 2-3 zone accused, how much teaching actually occurs from the moment that you get that Final Four berth and scouting and really having a good feel for your opponent? What is that like?
Well, I think it's a little bit different for the teams that are involved in the tournament right now because Carolina and Syracuse, this will be their 3rd time facing each other, one time in January, one time in February, and then now. So these teams are very familiar. Syracuse and Carolina are with each other. They're familiar with what they do and what they do well. But I don't know that there's a lot of new teaching. I think there's certainly refining. I think there's also certainly the little new nuances that you're going to try and throw at each other to try and keep you offset. We saw Syracuse not just sitting there 2-3, but also go into a little bit of a half-court trap, trying to move pace. Even though they're not a team that wants to necessarily run with Carolina, they are a team that certainly wants to keep Carolina at bay with some, because Carolina is very good inside with their passing. And when you see Kennedy Meeks and Bryce Johnson, Isaiah Hicks had 21 up in Syracuse in January. Those guys had a lot of success passing from the high post, low post, which, of course, is the way you defeat a 2-3 zone aside from your perimeter shooting. So I think a lot more of just trying to refine rather than actually teach.
I'm talking to Eric Montross, former UNC Tar Heel player and 9th overall pick it was at 94. And Eric is an analyst for Westwood One. He's with us here on Tiki Tierney. Let me refine the question a little bit more here, more specific. Obviously, they know the 2-3 zone from the previous experience, but I don't know from those games if out of necessity Syracuse pressed it all like they had to against Virginia. Now, you press Carolina, you run the risk of this turning into a layup line immediately and you getting run out of the gym, and Virginia's not really conditioned to deal with that. So I understand personnel is very different, but do you think that we see Boeheim just deploy that in spurts just to kind of give a little change up, a different look to Carolina?
I think adjustment on the fly is something that you always want to have up your sleeve, and you've got 2 tremendous coaches in Boeheim and Williams who have cut their teeth for many years, and now they get a chance to take all of that knowledge and battle against each other on the biggest stage. And so I do think that we don't know exactly what we're going to see. These guys, I think that's part of the allure of the Final Four, that you have an opportunity to see something that you just don't get to see every day. I think a lot of people are looking at this Syracuse team and maybe throwing a little bit of discredit to them, saying, well, yeah, they didn't have a real tough road to the Final Four. They weren't even maybe supposed to be in the tournament, and now here they are. Oh, Carolina is going to waltz over them. I think that's a far cry from what's going to happen. I think we're right now you're in the midst of some very high-level basketball for both these teams, and I don't know that we do know what to expect, which is why everybody's going to want to tune in.
Yeah, Eric, this is fascinating when I go back and think about the history of these two coaches, because Roy Williams was at Kansas, and he left Kansas after he lost that 0-3 championship to Jim Boeheim's Syracuse Orange. And so you know they know each other. You know that's one of the deciding factors. Obviously, it'll be about the guys on the court, but who has the advantage here? Is it Roy Williams? Is it coaching? You look back to the Dean Smith era when you guys won a championship. A lot of it was coaching. You guys got tired. He wholesale substituted. You had the strength down the stretch to beat Michigan. How much of that is going to come into who ultimately wins this game and gets into the championship?
Well, it's a good question. It's a good perspective. I have to say, I think that when you look at Final Four games and tournament games in March, and it kind of goes back to a point we made earlier, you're talking about how much do you teach at this time of the year and how much do you rely on what has already been taught. And I think that you look at these two teams, obviously they've got coaches that have their own pedigree. We know they've been teaching all year. So now it's really about performance and who can perform. And March is built on individual and team performances, and these two teams have had them. And so I think you look now more at who's going to be able to put the performance on the deck on display on Saturday. And, Syracuse is obviously shorthanded with the number of players they play in comparison. I mean, they barely play 7. They've only played 7 in the tournament so far that have even logged minutes. So of that, they've got 5 guys that are averaging close to 30 minutes a game. So they really don't like to throw a lot of different wrinkles into their lineup. Carolina, on the other hand, is pretty easy to play 9, 10 guys. But again, I think it's a matter of will Trevor Cooney have 27 again, like he did at Carolina or up in Syracuse? Will Isaiah Hicks have a 20-plus game again? Will Carolina be able to score as easily on assisted baskets because of their passing within the zone? Or is Syracuse going to create turnovers, and then they'll have their own opportunity to convert on those situations? You said they don't want to run, but if they get an easy opportunity deflecting a pass on the wing, you better believe it. They're going to be shot out of a cannon, and they're going to go down, and they're going to score. So I think that these teams right now have areas they can capitalize on, but one of them will rise to the top as far as the categories that are capitalized on.
Eric, I wanted to ask you this. Talking to Eric Montross, former Tar Heel, Westwood One analyst, and he's with us here on Tiki Tierney, CBS Sports Radio. Buddy Hield, let's switch it up for a sec. Get to the Sooners quickly. I'm trying to find a comparison that I think fits, and I'm having a rough time. And we had Wally Zerbiak on the show yesterday, and Wally compared Buddy to Ray Allen. I respectfully disagreed because I think Ray is a better athlete. A young Ray Allen could get to the rim and yoke it down in traffic. I don't really. Buddy's not that kind of guy. I said Mitch Richmond. But I don't love it, admittedly. Do you have a comparison? You've been around the game a long time. Who does Buddy Hield remind you of?
Oh, gosh. Well, first of all, the problem with asking me that question is you're talking to a center.
I hear you. I hear you.
So most of my comparisons don't end up on the wing, on the perimeter. But, I think that each of these players, and so I don't have a great answer for you. I do think that when you look at this young man, the thing that you have to look at initially is just the amount of time that he's converting on his field goals. And when he's shooting 50% as a perimeter player and mid-40s from behind the arc, you can find any of those guys that you mentioned, whether it's a Ray Allen, Mitch Richmond, whoever you put in that category, they're all shooters and scorers. And I think that's the piece that is so impressive about this young man is not that maybe some of the other qualities that surround him, some of the hype, but the fact that he's consistently been, and that's really the mark of excellence from any player, from any position, is are you consistently good? And he's not only consistently good, he's consistently excellent.
Yeah, Eric, last question for you that I have, and because it takes me back to 1993 when I was just leaving high school and So college sports were a big part of, aspirations for me. And I think about that Michigan game, your 93 game. You had some big-time players. You had a great recruiting class coming in with your class. George Lynch was on that squad. Rick Fox was on that squad. But when I think about the game, I think about Chris Webber. I wonder when people ask you, obviously you're the one with the ring, right? You guys are displaying the ring. But do people remember more Carolina, or do they remember more Michigan's faults?
Well, I think that it's a matter of perspective. If you're a Wolverine fan, you're going to remember some of the mistakes that Michigan made. I think that if you're a Carolina fan, you're going to remember Donald Williams torching it from three-point land. I think you're going to remember the quality of the team, top to bottom. The five guys for Carolina's team that, and I say five, there were plenty more of us, but the five starters that really combined and needed each other to build up to the high level of success. So, I think of when I get comments about that game, certainly it's more partisan, it's more Carolina blue-colored.
Yeah.
And it comes up, about the timeout, but I really think that discredits the quality of play that Michigan and Carolina had that year, because you want to force guys into situations where they make mistakes. That happened to be the one that made the headlines, but it's a game of mistakes. It's a game of controlling those mistakes and trying to capitalize and put it to good use.
Eric, really nice chat. Maybe we'll bump into you in Houston. Eric Montross, former Tar Heel. He's got the chip, and C-Web does not. Thank you, big man. Appreciate it.
All right, gentlemen. Have a good one.
Take care, Eric.
Back at you. Looks like a